Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Series with me, Kevin Britz, proudly powered by leadershipbydesign.co, leading the charge with insights, information, and ultimately effective results. Joining me in today's leadership and coaching segment is an international speaker and coach, best known for his transformational programs with high achievers who are often in the public eye. Gido Shimanski, is it correct?
Yes.
Gido, welcome to the show and thanks for making some time to chat with us.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this.
So before we jump into our questions and what we're going to be talking about today, don't you just want to give us some background about who you are and more insights about what you do?
Well, who I am is vastly based on my past, as it is for so many of us. I used to be a performer. I used to be on stage for most of my life. So I used to be a ballet dancer. I changed into acting. I changed into singing. And of course, for 25 years, I had to perform and very often I covered other people. I had to deliver literally on the push of a button and, you're out now. And on the other hand, in those 25 years, even though on the outside, I seem to have a pretty good career, I was always driven by that one question that was in my head, repeating and repeating again, saying, when are they going to find out that you're not good enough? When are they going to find out that you actually don't belong here? Yeah. And so I do have, most of my life, I have been on stage. But about 15 years ago, there was this call inside me that just was looking for something else. And I wasn't thinking about coaching. I was just looking for answers for myself. And I took a group coaching program or a training for health. These were like 300 people in the room. So I trained to be a health coach. And it looked at how to release blockages in the system that might create an illness or stop you from healing quicker. And in this course, in the first module, I just literally sat there thinking, well, maybe this can help me with my crazy head, and my I'm not being good enough. The training was led by a Western medicine doctor who said, we only ever look at the symptoms. And by the way, but never at the cause of the stuff of your problems. And by the way, you can use this for anything, for your career, your money, your mindset, for your love life, and of course, for your health, which is the main aim. And it literally changed my life. It changed the way I performed. It changed the way I behaved. It changed everything. And then colleagues start coming out asking, so what are you doing differently? Can you help me? And this is how I ended up in doing what I do today. What I do today, if you want to hear that, I'm not sure. So,
well, yeah, well, we're going to get to that. But I mean, I think that's such a fascinating story to kind of go from, being on stage. And I relate to that. I used to, in my 20s, I used to be a singer. So I know that, what that requires of someone to kind of show up and be available and camera action kind of go, you kind of just have to make it happen, and whether you're in the mood or not, right? Exactly. But I mean, leading to some of the work that you do today, when we first had our intro conversation, we had an interesting conversation around imposter syndrome, right? And this is partly where what piqued my interest around having this conversation, because very often we are found people see you performing, or people see you on a podcast, or they hear you on a podcast and they just assume you've got it all together and everything's fantastic, right? And life is pretty okay. But essentially we all go through a bit of imposter syndrome sometime in our lives. And this is kind of where, doing what you do today has kind of originated from, because you've been there, how that imposter syndrome can rule your life and take over your life. And don't you want to give us some insights about what that was for you and what your journey was to get into where you are today?
Yes, of course. Well, I so relate to what you just said, because very often we've, especially as leaders or high achievers, or in whatever position you are performing in right now, people only see the shiny outside and they see everything is working. And I do recognize that people very often came to me and said, "Oh, you always seem so calm. Everything seems to be working out for you." And inside, I don't want to say I was dying. I was not, but there was this constant fight going on. It was just crazy, continuously hiding, or I was continuously stuck in other people's heads, trying to find out what they think and what they want from me. And this sentence actually doesn't come from me. This was a client of mine. She said that to me. She was a high-performing footballer, and she said, I'm always in other people's heads. I wish I would just be in mine. And what it was for me. It was this. For me, it showed up the very first time I can actually pinpoint it. I had this dream of becoming the leading man, in that industry, meaning you play the main parts or one of the main parts in these big shows. And I had this mantra, I want to be this leading man, I want to be this leading man. And at the time, a friend of mine literally had it up till here, and he just said, "Can you print out your CV for me?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Print out your CV." And I did. And he said, "Read it out to me." And I read out all of these roles that I had played. But what I noticed, it took me a little while. It was, well, I played Jean-Michel in this part, but it was only because the director fancied me. And then I played this part because I was already in the company. And then they offered me this part in Cats because they couldn't find anyone. And then I realized I had an excuse for every single bit that I was doing, for every achievement I had in my life. I had an excuse why it had no value. And that really hit me hard, because he also made me realize that I already was living what I was setting out to do. I was very much in the leading man category. And the only person that couldn't see it and kept himself out of it, feeling it, living it, was myself. It was such a weird paradox that I caught myself, and I thought, this can't be it. And that was kind of the kickoff for everything I do today, because I see so many people that are extraordinary and they don't notice it. Everybody else sees it and they go like, "Well, I hope one day I'll be successful." And you're like, "Oh boy, where do we start?"
It's interesting that you say that, because very often, probably about 6-7 years ago when I started my business, and you make money and you kind of go, "Oh, okay, cool. So this must mean that I'm successful," right? And then people think you're doing wonderfully well, and you go through these ebbs and flows of life and your career, and you're on stage, or you're in the limelight, or you're the leading man of whatever you're doing, and then personally you start realizing that is not what's valuable, right? The money is great, but like, do you see the value? Do you feel the value? So it really ties back into that narrative that you're actually the imposter of your own life, and that's where it originates. But it's also the meaning that we give, the leading man role, and that's success. Once we drive that car or have that house or whatever that equation is for us, we put it outside of us, and it's an external motivator, which never really works.
You're absolutely right, because, well, I think we are being conditioned. We've been conditioned that this is how it works all our life. This is, in our society, you need to have the money, the house, the wife or the husband, and the car. And then you get there. And I always tell this one story of this footballer who came up to me, and he's one of Europe's most prominent footballers. And he said, "I have the house, the wife, the money, the car. I play for my favorite club. I thought I'd be happy now." And that really pained me. He wasn't a client. He never became a client. But that conversation, because he knew what I was doing, and I was working for a corporation that he was working with. And I thought, there's so many people out there who are linking their happiness to a future goal. Now, that's not really part of the imposter. It's part of the imposter, but that's probably a different conversation where I'm going right now briefly, but I'll come back. But if we are continuously thinking, "I'll be happy when I have the money. I'll be happy when I then have the house. I'll be happy when I have that wife or husband. I'll be happy when I have, when I lead that company, when I become CEO, when I become whatever." But it's like these old Buster Keaton movies, I think it was, who keeps kicking the head, and every time he bends over to pick up the head, he keeps kicking it. So you will never get there, or you want to try to reach the horizon, and the closer you get, the further it gets. So we got to find a way to, as you said before so beautifully, to find the value first, to find that happy place first, and along the way release what I call the monkeys, release that imposter that keeps you locked into not allowing yourself to actually relax into your talent. And I think this is such an important key when we talk about imposter and people in leadership positions. And it doesn't matter if you're a singer or if you're a footballer, or if you're a CEO, because I have a weird bracket of clients. It's once I get the outside confirmation, I think I'll be happy, and then I believe it, but they never do. Because they grew into that position, whatever position that is, they grew into it, they've been given that position, and clearly because there's some talent, clearly because someone sees you in that position, clearly because you have delivered, but our inside game never grows along. The inside game always gets, still is stuck at the 7-year-old that has to prove its worth to daddy or mommy because, whatever happened. And it's usually not the big traumas. It's just the mindset that we grow up with. And so looking into that and then allowing yourself to unravel what's already there. It's not looking at the, as I say, traumatic events, but just questioning, is the beliefs you still hold about yourself, is that actually still valid? And usually it's not.
What's interesting, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, is what's interesting is very often we hear successful, wealthy people say, money doesn't make you happy. Until you get to that position, and you kind of go, yeah, money doesn't make me happy, right? And until you've really gone through the experience of that, you really start understanding that this external idea or this conditioning that success is this one thing, or success means this, or this is what it looks like. Today, doing and being who I am, I now realize that I get to decide what success looks like, right?
Yes.
And I think it speaks right directly against that imposter syndrome, because even today, I'll catch myself where I'll start going into a downward spiral of negative talk, and I catch myself, and I do like a hand gesture to it, and I'm like, zip it, like I'm not interested, I'm not going to that zone. And I think that's part and parcel of that condition that you mentioned, is that spiraling of downward, because like even the sentiment is like, I thought I would be happy now, right? Like by now I should be happy. And then you've kind of on this flip side of that, and you go, well, I'm still not happy. So then you kind of go, okay, but then what is happiness? Because then it's a deeper level conversation. And I think that's what the imposter syndrome also takes away. It kind of robs you from the realization of that, is there is more to you than this external thing that you're chasing, until you turn it around and reevaluate and see the value of what it is you do bring. And it then gives you a beautiful gift of belonging and value.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, I absolutely love Zip It. I'm gonna steal that from you.
You can use it.
Because I always talk about, I've got the monkeys here, and it's crazy because I had this for like 20 years, and then it fell out of a box, and I do have this little monkey sitting here, and I think it's like this monkey on your shoulder that continuously and forever tells you the same stories. You shouldn't be doing this. Who do you think you are? And sometimes it gets loud, and sometimes it's not as loud. Usually little side note, the more exhausted we get, the easier it is for them to creep up. So take care of your physical health. But to come to a point where you can actually say, zip it. I do love this. I always say, oh, hello, old friend. There you are again. And one of my clients once said, I do realize now the monkeys probably never shut up. So I now know they are the monkeys, but I'm not my monkeys. Yes. So there's a story. And someone said, well, if I now tell myself that it's, I tell myself a positive spiral, a positive story of, how good I am, which I believe they are, isn't that just a lie? I said, well, maybe, but all the BS you tell yourself, that's definitely a lie. So which lie do you rather follow?
Yeah.
So we're always stuck in some stories, and it's about choosing the better story. And also, as you said before, catching yourself when you go down that downward spiral. And I'm always interested in what triggers that spiral. What happens that you suddenly, and it's very often just before you hit the next level. It's the famous breakdown before the breakthrough. If you Nowadays, I love it. 10 years ago, I was ready to flee the country and do all crazy stuff. But nowadays, I'm like, you haven't felt this bad in so long. That must mean you're literally you're already breaking through. Just do it anyway. I know you want to vomit, and I'm kid you not, that we all know that feeling when you're suddenly asked to step into the next position. And to then deal with the monkeys or tell them to zip it is not always easy. But as I'm sure you provide tools to your clients, how to actually make the monkeys shut up and stay in the real story that they're just not used to yet. I believe that alignment, that knowing your worth, knowing what you can do, enjoying your talent, it comes down to actually enjoying what you're really good at. And so often when I work with professional footballers, very often it's bringing them back to how they played emotionally when they were 15, because it's back to their fun. It's back to their passion and not the pop star mentality and the cameras and the media and the millions that are watching and everybody who has something to say, because they have their training. They are at the top of their game, but they can't access the resources as much as they want to because they're cutting out the fun. They left that part behind, and it's coming. That is what I mean. You need to come back to what you're here to do and learn to enjoy how good you really are. And that's tricky.
But before we touch on the how, I just want to, like, you mentioned footballers. So one of the things that one of your clients sort of niches is working with including world champions, national team footballers, leading ladies of theater, CEOs, entrepreneurs. You work with this very sort of high stakes niche group of people, right? How did you sort of get into doing that? Because that's also quite interesting.
Yeah, I often wonder that myself, to be honest. To be honest, well, it was because I've been on stage, and so in the beginning, my niche in the beginning was transformational programs for creative high achievers who do well in the spotlight, but don't feel like a superstar inside. I still remember that tagline. That's 10 years ago. I realized when I came out with this tagline, and my mentor back then, she said, you need to work with business people. I said, oh, they have all their business coaches. She said, right, but they're business coaches. You go into the inner game. And the interesting thing is, so I started coaching. I lived in London at the time. And I had my clients. I started building up my practice. As we all do, I started off with free sessions, just trying it out, and then building groups and all these little things. But I realized very soon that it was all the creatives that came to me. Simply, I think that's just law of attraction. And then one of the very first ones was someone who heard about the method that I was doing from someone else, and I was the only one doing it in the UK. And I'm not allowed to name names, but that was a member of a band that I listened to in the 80s with 110 million sold records, and I didn't even realize it was. And I just went,
so they're world famous.
And so I'm sitting in a hotel room talking about, and that was a health issue back then. And so it kind of evolved from there. And I just realized I find the high achieving mindset, I have to perform on the high level, but I'm still dealing with this crap inside, pardon my French. I find that very easy because I can relate so much, and the root is always the same. It's just I like the big problems. I have to go out and there's 70,000 people watching me tonight, and I feel like I can't. And for some reason, that makes sense to me. And so sorry, the first client who actually, when I had this tagline about the creatives, my very first client was actually a banker who met me in an art gallery. It was an opening, and I think it was actually a sister who said, do you also work with normal people? And that's the power of a tight niche. It's
Normal
just the,
people, yeah.
and he was far from the average, the average person. So
yeah. I mean, and that's such a fascinating story that's been the evolution for you, and I really love that story when you share it. But so tell us a bit of the how do you help people, because I think we know about imposter syndrome. We don't always, do much about it, or we just spiral down, or take medication, or drink ourselves until we fall over, or do some kind of addictive behavior, and so give us a bit of that. How do you help people, and what are the results that they are experiencing?
Well, on a practical level, my favorite way to work is via coaching via insights. So when people realize, exploring their inner belief system. Of course, I use tools like trance coaching, which is very close to hypnosis. I still love tapping points. So there's different, I call them the little magic box we can bring in.
Yeah.
But what I really love doing is exploring with them, first of all, of course, what they perceive to be the problem, which is usually not the problem that they come with. We always know this. As an example, someone comes in and says, I'm a CEO, or I own a company with someone else, but we don't communicate well anymore. So there's a lot of distress within the whole company. And you think that's the problem. But of course, you explore I would say usually the emotion behind the problem, or what's really the story that's behind it. And then we just go deep. And it's people often get scared that you see something about them that you shouldn't see, or it's nothing like that. It's very conversational, but it's about showing you that you hold very likely two contradicting beliefs in your system, and that those beliefs, the story, I call it the operating system. When we are being brought up in the first 7 to 9 years, I mean, you will know this, of course. We are getting an operating system that then, decides our whole life, what we are worth, what we can do, what we can't do. And that's just a operating system we have learned. And that's very helpful when we grow up, because we need to operate in that world that we are brought up in. But later on, maybe when you're 30, 40, 50, it doesn't serve you anymore to continuously harmonize the entire room, because your mom might have an aggression fit, or your dad might be drinking or something. So we explore what the original feeling is, what beliefs are behind that. And very often what we find is that they're very contradictory beliefs. If that's a word? They're contradicting each other. I'm in Germany, so in case you haven't noticed yet. And you bring up this belief and you go, I can't believe I'm actually saying this. I mean, I performed on this high level, whatever that means. And now I just feel I still want, I don't know, loyalty from my family or something like this. And it pops up, and then you dig deeper, and suddenly you find a second belief that is completely contradicting the first belief. And very often you can literally see the eyes twirl, and not quite like in a comic, but in the moment you realize that something doesn't make sense anymore, the brain finds its new route. And that's what I love, because you don't need the tools anymore. They're great tools, and I love working with trances and all this, reprogramming myself in the sleep. But I had this 2 days ago, a young father sitting here saying, well, I'm working on all that pressure, but I have a 2-year-old there's a lot of aggression there. And we worked at his self-worth. And suddenly the whole family, he literally just sat there going, oh my God, I've been holding on to this, continuously having to prove my value to everybody, including my toddler.
Wow.
And the moment we released that stress the week before, he appeared here. Yes, it was yesterday. He said, my toddler, 2-year-old, for the first time said she loves me.
Wow.
And I mean, and that was one of the, I think, 7 or 8 stories. And that happened. And I always say, once you change the inside, the outside will always change. You can try to change your business partner. You can try to change your spouse. You can try to change all the outside. I've been doing this in my acting career. Dialect coaching, singing classes, train my body, but the feeling of not being good enough never went away. I had to go deep. And then there are the tools, like I talk about a lot about forgiveness, about letting go, and then really just understanding where your mindset is.
I love that. And just, I mean, if you wouldn't mind, just before we close off today's conversation, just touch on forgiveness and, what it's, from your experience, because I see, you also have one of the upcoming courses, which we'll chat about, is around forgiveness. What does it do for people when you've tapped into forgiveness and because just the imposter syndrome itself, right? There's an element of forgiving yourself for doing that kind of harm, right? And you've got to allow to go, well, I forgive myself for making that really bad decision for the last 25 years. But don't you want to just touch on that forgiveness, because it's such I think, an instrumental part of really seeing the value.
Oh, thank you. Because I do love it, because I realized it was one of the big building stones or building steps, or stepping stones is the word I was looking for, that I used. And I've seen it literally in every coaching program, that at some point there's someone, let it be yourself, let it be a parent, let it be culture, whatever, that you're still angry with. And usually we are holding on to very often we're holding on to a lot of anger, a lot of aggression, a lot of unforgiveness, because we're trying to keep ourselves safe. And when I start talking about forgiveness, not usually, but very often people go, ugh, or they go, they don't want to touch it, they don't want to talk about it because they think it's something religious, or they think it's too heavy, or they go, because they instantly know who they don't want to forgive. And if you have that feeling, and you had that feeling for 20 years, it's been occupying a big space in your system. And there's a couple of myths around forgiveness. For me, it's the self-help tool number one. And I always say, if there's one thing you need to do, learn to forgive as often and as quickly as you can, because it's not about the other person. It's not to set someone else free. It's not to say what they did was right. It's also not to say you win, I lose. It's you're giving yourself the freedom and to reclaim that power again. Why is that? When we hold on to an anger because someone has wronged us, someone betrayed us, let's say in business. I've heard this about business, a business partner betrayed me, or my trainer never gave me the space I deserved in my club. Or, of course, there's a lot of ex-spouses, ex-partners, that's usually a biggie, and forgiving yourself. And usually we don't allow ourselves to let go of that anger because we believe, understandably, that by holding on to the anger, we protect ourselves from whatever happened never happening again. Let's go to the unspeakable things that might happen to you that might have happened in the past, and you of course you're holding on to the anger, so that will never happen again. The problem with that is the person who's done that to you might actually not be alive anymore, might be in a different country, different continent. However, you're still in that same energy, so you're in essence keeping yourself in the same energy that you're trying to protect yourself from. And that is why I'm so passionate about it, that forgive the big stuff and the small stuff, because all you do is, it's like you're getting all the clothes off that are too tight. You're getting the dirt off your shoes. It's like you free yourself layer by layer by layer. And that's one of the biggest things to just get you back to yourself, because you're not continuously trapped in someone else's story of what they did to you.
Yeah.
And it's, as you can see, I'm very passionate about forgiveness, and I think everybody should learn.
But if we could summarize today's conversation, because I just love everybody suffers. It's sort of it's, if you have a heart, you have a imposter syndrome. If you have a brain, you have imposter syndrome, or you've gone through it at least, So if you had to summarize today's conversation, what are like 3 beautiful takeaways that people can start being aware of to kind of go, okay, maybe this is imposter syndrome, or maybe this is a really good tactic for me to curb that approach because it's not working?
First of all, no, you're not alone, especially when you're a high achiever. Chances are every other high achiever has gone through this at some point in their lives or their careers. My second point would be, don't believe everything you think. Question, not what people say, what you think, because it is your filters. When you catch yourself in stress, I love something that I call check in, check out. When you get yourself in stress, when you get an email that accuses you of something, or you're in a fight or something like this, before you react, find a way to bring your system down, because otherwise you are reacting from the monkeys, from all the BS from the past. And when we're in that state, we're going into a highly stressed state. We're already in fight or flight mode. Usually we don't even read the right words anymore. I've known this from my own experience. You're reading an email, you go, you're gonna have it. And you go, oh no, take a step back. I do something. You find that on my YouTube channel, just a ha breathing or 2x breathing. It's a very common breathing exercise where you breathe in a certain amount of time and twice as long out through a ha sound, using a sound. And that brings your sympathetic nervous system down immediately. What it helps you do is think clearly again. So you're not reacting from the old triggers that are triggering the whole imposter page.
Yeah.
So the whole monkey gang is there. And you actually then, and this is the experience I had, I went back to an email I was getting and then thinking, that's not what I read half an hour ago. There is no accusation in this email. There were a few words that triggered my old stuff.
Yeah.
This would be my main quick giveaways.
No, I love that. I love that you mentioned don't always listen to what you think, right? Because invariably we kind of just listen to that voice as if it's the voice of the Lord or the voice of the law, or some kind of and it could just be a limiting belief that's kicking into gear. But I mean, before we just speak about some of the programs and your books that you've got going, you say you've got 2 gifts that you can share with the audience that we'll put it in the description box below. So if anybody wants to check out the actual free gifts, what are the gifts? Because they're really awesome, and thank you for that.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for sharing, for letting me share this. One is a masterclass on the 3 major self-sabotages that high achievers go through and why they're holding themselves back from being happy. So there's a bit of the stuff that we talked about today is in there. And the other one is the first chapter of the upcoming book, The Forgiveness Ninja, where I go into the whole forgiveness work. And I want to make forgiveness light and easy, and it's when I teach, there's a lot of dirty jokes. So to take the holiness of out of all of it and just go, listen, this is for you. And so there you learn a little bit why forgiveness is so important. It's the first chapter of the book, and the other one is my masterclass.
Fantastic. So, and that masterclass, tell us about that. The up and coming courses, which is not it's a former 6 weeks masterclass, but it's now 8 weeks to feeling good enough that you're putting together, and the Forgiveness Ninja, right? Tell us more about that.
Well, the 6-week master is, or what's now going to be the 8-week to feeling good enough, is a course that came about during the pandemic in the beginning, when I just saw a lot of people are struggling. I mean, I started off with 3 master classes, and it kind of developed out of this. And it's a full arc on how do I understand myself? Why am I ticking the way I tick? Can I, what's really running in my system? How can I change it? How do I let go? It's basically the highlights of all of my work in order to get out of this continuously feeling of not being good enough and starting to create a new story. Usually the people I work with are already in very good positions. It's not about becoming more successful. It's about actually being able to enjoy themselves and going, there is a part of me I love, or maybe I just really love myself. So that is the formerly 6-week masters. People never knew what it was about, and then I asked around, and it is about getting to feel good enough and actually accessing your resources. And in that course, we talk a little bit about forgiveness. And when that was done a couple of times, people were asking for the next course. I said, what do you want? And they said, we need to dive deeper into the forgiveness. And the title, the Forgiveness Ninja, came basically out of a conversation. I said, you need to become a forgiveness ninja. Let it be the person in the cheese shop, or someone who honks at you on the street, or, the big traumatic events. That's a full method that explores not just I need to forgive myself and I need to forgive the other person, but for me, there's 5 different ways that keep popping up. And once we understand that root that we can weave through, you can learn to forgive in a minute. I've seen it. And I've seen people go from, I'm angry at my husband from 20 years ago, to being free. I've seen people go, I'm over 30 years old, and for the first time, I feel actual love for myself. And that is when I, sit there with, tears in my eyes, because it's easy. You just need to understand there's more angles than what most people think about forgiveness.
Absolutely. It's transformational, right?
It's transformational, yes.
He is an international speaker and coach, best known for his transformational program with high achievers who are often in the public eye. Gido Shimanski, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for making some time to just share some insights with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing.
Absolutely. Guys, please remember to like and share, and tune into the Lunchtime Series every Wednesday and Thursday for more from myself and the Lunchtime Series team. We'll chat to you soon. Thanks, Gido.